The renowned pianist Vincent Sterling's remarks reverberated throughout the expansive hall of Lincoln Art Center, prompting quiet chuckles from New York's distinguished musical community. "Listen, young man, why don't you perform something for everyone here? I'm confident you can manage Happy Birthday." At 16 years old, David Thompson remained still next to the grand Steinway piano, gripping his white mobility cane. He'd come to this highly exclusive charitable performance with his music instructor from public school at AT 42. Vincent had earned recognition as among the finest interpreters of Chopin's works in modern times. "Go ahead. There's no need for timidity," he urged, his tone dripping with patronizing superiority. "Our philanthropic supporters would surely appreciate witnessing how their investments in diversity are utilized." Nobody was aware that David dedicated 8 hours each day to practice sessions on a borrowed electronic keyboard in the basement of a church. Nobody realized that by his 3rd birthday, he possessed the ability to replicate complete symphonies after a single listening. Nobody could have guessed that in that instant, he was committing to memory each note of the contempt permeating the atmosphere. To be honest, David responded with composure. "My preference is for Bach." Vincent released a laugh. "Bach, you say? Which composition would you be capable of performing, young man?" "The C minor Partita No. 2, though it may exceed the comprehension level of those present." A heavy stillness filled the space. Vincent experienced a surge of annoyance. Beyond their comprehension? "Young man, these individuals provide financial backing to the planet's most prestigious orchestras." "Vincent," interrupted Dr. Harrison Webb, who conducted the Boston Symphony Orchestra, "it might be wise to proceed with our scheduled programming." "Absolutely not," Vincent countered. "This young David has apparently cast doubt on our attendees' cultural refinement. I believe it's appropriate that he showcases this musical excellence he's suggesting he possesses." Vincent executed the opening measures with overly theatrical gestures. "Notice, David, this demands not merely technical skill, but mature emotional understanding." What remained unknown to Vincent was that throughout 8 years, ever since the automobile collision that claimed his vision and his mother and father, David had consecrated every waking hour to his musical pursuit. Deborah, his aunt who worked as a janitor at the Conservatory of Music, had secured his access to exceptional recordings and tactile music notation. "Dr. Sterling," David stated, "your performance of those opening measures was in the key of D major. The 2nd partita is composed in C minor." A frigid hush fell over the gathering. Vincent's complexion flushed crimson. Naturally, that was deliberate. "I was evaluating his fundamental pitch recognition." "I understand," David answered. "In that case, you surely also comprehend that Bach created this partita following the passing of Maria Barbara, his first spouse. Every section represents a different phase of the grieving process. This is precisely why authentic performance demands more than mere technical proficiency. It demands having experienced genuine loss." The observation struck Vincent with force. "Excellent. Given your extensive knowledge of musical theory, why don't you provide us with a practical demonstration?" David moved toward the instrument. "Before commencing, I have one inquiry. Has anyone present experienced losing all they cherished in a single instant and subsequently reconstructing their spirit one musical note at a time? That's enough superficial philosophy," Vincent retorted sharply. "You either perform immediately or depart." David gave a nod. "Actually, I'd prefer to make a minor modification. Rather than the 2nd partita, what if I demonstrate something more instructive for everyone here? What if I illustrate the distinction between accurate note execution and genuine musical expression?" "Proceed," Vincent said, advancing to the piano. "I'll first demonstrate the proper interpretation of the partita by someone with legitimate musical training." Vincent commenced playing with technical accuracy. Each note landed precisely where it should, each rhythm impeccably timed. While he performed, David absorbed every subtlety, cataloging each component. Vincent concluded with a theatrical final gesture. The audience offered restrained applause. "Now, let's observe your interpretation of this composition that clearly surpasses your abilities." David moved to the piano bench. Prior to starting, there's something I want you to understand. Bach didn't compose the second partita simply as a technical demonstration. He wrote it as a conversation with sorrow. Even beginning students are aware of that. Vincent replied dismissively. David offered a smile. You're correct. Historical background is simple to commit to memory. However, personally experiencing that anguish transforms everything. The distinction, Dr. Sterling, between how you interpreted it and how I will isn't about technique. You performed the notes Bach composed. I'm going to perform the sorrow he felt. David inhaled deeply and shut his eyes. As his fingers made contact with the opening notes, something extraordinary occurred. These weren't simply identical notes to what Vincent had played. These were identical notes transfigured by authentic experience, by actual suffering. The initial notes caused Vincent to pull back reflexively. David's performance seemed like direct communication with Bach spanning the centuries. Each musical phrase bore the burden of his personal journey. The savage rejection of loss at 8 years old, the fury toward a society that perceived him solely as an impediment, and ultimately the healing power of acceptance. Good Lord, Dr. Webb murmured. Throughout his 4-decade professional life, he'd never encountered such profound emotional resonance. Vincent sensed his knees weakening. The young man's technical ability wasn't merely flawless, it exceeded his own. Margaret Rothschild, who had expressed disdain earlier, now had moisture running down her face. How can this be happening? Patricia Wells whispered quietly. David wasn't simply performing the partita, he was recounting his personal narrative through the music. Every interpretive decision Vincent had executed, technically accurate yet emotionally hollow, was being revealed. This young man represents one of the most exceptional innate talents I've ever observed. Dr. Webb whispered. Vincent experienced something fracturing within his chest. This visually impaired black youth from disadvantaged neighborhoods wasn't merely superior to him. He surpassed every pianist Vincent had encountered in his career. David brought the partita to a close with such refinement that the ensuing silence felt holy. When he finally rose and faced the audience, his expression showed no conceded victory, only serene self-respect. The standing ovation exceeded anything that venue had previously experienced. It transcended mere applause. It represented acknowledgement, contrition, and jubilation. Mr. Sterling, stated Dr. Webb, approaching with obvious disdain, I believe we need to have an extensive discussion about your arrangement with our orchestra. David walked over to Vincent, offering his hand. I appreciate the chance to perform, Dr. Sterling. Occasionally, we require confrontation with our own musical expression to comprehend our true identity. Half a year afterward, David navigated Juilliard's corridors as a complete scholarship recipient, becoming the youngest in the school's recorded history. Margaret Rothschild now provided personal funding for his education and created a foundation dedicated to discovering neglected musical prodigies. Vincent Sterling confronted a contrasting fate. His professional engagements were terminated sequentially. The internet video documenting David's performance and the vicious humiliation effort decimated his professional standing. Deborah observed her nephew making preparations for Carnegie Hall. Doesn't what occurred make you feel resentful? David smiled warmly. Aunt Deborah, that evening Vincent Sterling provided me with the most valuable gift possible. He provided me with an audience. On the evening of his performance, David played before a capacity crowd. Vincent observed from his modest Queens residence, each note serving as a reminder of his downfall. Music isn't the possession of any individual, David informed the audience. It exists to forge connections between human souls irrespective of our origins or physical characteristics. That represents the genuine equality within art. 24 months later, David released his debut recording, which achieved status as the highest-selling classical music recording of that 10-year period. Vincent persisted in providing individual instruction, his global career irrevocably ruined. The narrative of David Thompson achieved legendary status, demonstrating that authentic artistic mastery recognizes no boundaries established by individuals who fear exceptional ability in others. As David consistently expressed, true vindication isn't found in destroying those who caused you harm, but in creating something more magnificent than they could ever conceive.